Today we're looking at myth 5, once you forgive, that's the end of it. And I think this is a huge myth because once you forgive, there's stuff that's always takes place afterwards that we have to deal with. Now, sometimes we can just forgive someone and we're over with it, but sometimes we can't. And so I'm going to give you an illustration that actually comes from one of my friends, and it's not a fun illustration, but at least you'll get the point of what I'm trying to talk about, because there's a myth that, well, once you forgive, then it's over, everything's fine and dandy. But that's not how life is. All right, so here it is. I had one of my friends had his 2-year-old grandson was physically abused by a man, and he was very hurt. He ended up in the hospital. There was massive swelling in his brain, and they had to actually cut out a piece of his skull, and they tried to save it and reattach it once the swelling went down and all those things, but it didn't work, and so they had to put actually a metal plate in his head. And he had problems with his eyes. He had problems. He couldn't walk. He couldn't actually even sit up. He was having all these difficulties. And so this was going on day after day and week after week. It was a huge, long process of recovery. Well, at some point during this recovery, my friend prayed and forgave this person for hurting his grandson. And so every time he saw his grandson, he had to look at him and the effects. He would say, he'd be dragging his leg because he just couldn't walk right. And he'd walk with a limp and drag his leg, and he would do all these things. And seeing this over and over and over and over again, even though he had forgiven, he still had to see this. And so that was really kind of a tough part. Well, this young man was in the hospital and stuff. He had a stroke, and part of his brain was dead, and actually he's going to be affected for his whole entire life unless the Lord heals him. Now, we've been praying for him for a long time and believe that the Lord does desire to heal him, and so we're asking God to heal his body. So now think about this. He's forgiven and he's released, and he's given this person over to the Lord. But now they have to go through this whole process of seeing his grandson in this condition over and over again. And not only that, but there was a trial. And he had to travel and go to the trial and see all the evidence and the things that the doctors were saying and the evidence in the court. And they went through step by step the things that took place and the damage that was done. And so over and over and over again, he has to listen to this stuff. And so the idea behind it is he's forgiven, but he's constantly having to deal with evidence that of the thing that he forgave. And even in the midst of the trial, even in the midst of these things, he found himself one day praying for his salvation. He wanted for this man to come to know Jesus, the one who had hurt his grandson. And so sometimes when we forgive, we have to face the person. We have to see them over and over again. Maybe it's in a work situation, a home situation, something like this. And so it's not just a simple, easy little thing where I just forgive and it's such a light thing. But there's sometimes even a need for constant forgiveness, because sometimes what can happen to us is when we see this situation take place, when we look at the grandson dragging his foot or something, we can just, oh man, why did this have to happen, and begin to get angry again. But to release that. So sometimes forgiveness is a repetitive thing. It's not just a one-time thing. If we have these emotions, we release them again to the Lord and allow him to do a work. Now, I want to say this too, because this is a question I think that comes up quite a bit when people are saying, well, wait a minute, why should you forgive this person? Look what they did. Well, we need to forgive the person, but we can also seek justice. because this person obviously broke a law. He just beat up a defenseless little kid, and that's against the law in every state in America. And so he did this, and so we should seek justice. We should ask for justice to be done. So he did go through the trial, and he was found guilty, and he is paying the price for his crime. And so when we do this, we want to make sure that we're not downplaying or even pushing off justice and those kind of things, because God's given us the government for a reason. The government is supposed to stop evildoers and is to help keep our land in peace so that we can live and dwell in peace. And we want people to be afraid of the authorities. We want people to be afraid of being arrested, because that will stop some things from taking place. And so that's really important to remember. Now, there are times where we can just say, I choose to forgive and I'm not going to press charges, but that's a choice that needs to be made. But in the case of this man, for example, he hurt a little kid, and he could hurt another one. I mean, who knows what he's capable of doing if he's done this to this young man. And so there's protection of others that we have to think of. I was just recently watching a documentary on Martin Luther King Jr., and he was very famous for his role in our civil. I'm having problems figuring out this. Anyway, he played this role in trying to turn around things in the South and all the stuff that was going on there. And a guy came up to him and was angry with him and just started beating him. He just punched him and hurt him. And so then he was interviewed, and he goes, well, are you going to press charges? And he goes, no, I've chosen not to press charges. Now, that's his prerogative, and he could do that. Now, of course, this guy's violent, and he might do something else, but it was his choice and his determination. No, I want to do this. I want to do it without violence, and really show that violence is not a good thing. And so he decided to just forgive this guy. Now, that's a choice, and he made it. So anyway, that's kind of the thoughts that I have on this idea, this wonderful myth that once you forgive, then it's over with. That's the end of it. Just forgive and forget. Doesn't happen that way. And so I just want to encourage you again that if you need to forgive someone, then please do so. If you're holding something against someone, all it does is harm you. So release those who have hurt you. Pray for those who have harmed you, and seek God's forgiveness for your own life, actually, too. So there you go. That's going to be the end of our time today. You have an awesome day. Thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what touched your heart the most from this video.